right, welcome back to another episode of the Psychopedia podcast. I'm your host, Investigator Slater, here with another banger for Sadistic September. We got a two-parter. This is part one. I'm going to tell you now at the top of this episode to please subscribe to Psychopedia because you may think that you have to wait a week for part two, and that would be within reason to think that. If I were to surprise you and drop part two sooner, the only way you're going to know is if you subscribe. Wherever you listen to this podcast right now, if you subscribe, then you will know. You will know if this the second part to this one drops sooner. And after you hear part one, I promise you, you are not going to want to miss an extra second for part two. You're going to want to hear it right away. So definitely subscribe. Yes, Tony, I feel like you have a face on right now.
I just have commentaries about if this episode of Sadistic September is just as brutal as last week's was. I am bracing for impact right now.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It really is. I mean, there's no way around it. Like when we're dealing with sadistic killers and, rapists and creeps and the dredges of this world, it's going to be bad. It's going to be real, real bad. So yeah, I have some trigger warnings going on throughout this episode. Warranted for sure. And people who know about this case, you know what you're in for. I will give you a little heads up. It's a little bit Toy Box Killer meets Cameron Hooker in the Colleen Stan case. And those are amongst the most depraved human beings we have ever discussed on this podcast. So we're combining those motherfuckers and we're putting them into the case we are talking about today and in part two. Consider yourselves warned. So I actually just got back from Maryland. Firefighter Dave and I took a little trip down to Maryland for a few days because Dave got our names inscribed on a brick in the Alumni Center down at UMD. Really, really cute. This is what it said, ready? The brick said this: Brookie 04, Davey 02, failed calc to be with you.
It's so cute. I saw your post about that.
Don't you want to throw up? So yeah, Firefighter Dave literally threw his exam. He purposely failed his calc exam because he wouldn't be able to graduate. And if he couldn't graduate, that meant that he couldn't leave me by myself at the University of Maryland. So he purposely failed, which was, best move ever.
He saddled himself with an extra year of student loan debt just for you, Slater.
Yeah, that's no joke, too, by the way.
No, it's really no joke, yeah.
And I felt pretty good about myself after I learned he did that. I was like, damn, my persuasion can rule a nation. And Beyonce fans will know why I just said that. Anyway, we are immortalized down in the University of Maryland, and people can now walk all over us in perpetuity, which I happen to like. Here is my point in bringing up Maryland and UMD. So we were down there for 4 days, right? And I don't even want to say exactly where we were in Maryland. I feel bad because what I'm about to say isn't a compliment. But where we were staying in Maryland, we felt like we were in a simulation. Full stop. The entire county has this unnerving steadiness to it, matching architecture everywhere, totally predictable traffic flow with everyone going exactly the proper speed limit, sterile neighborhoods everywhere you looked. It was the type of place where every time we left his parents' house, didn't matter if it was the morning, the dead of night, we had to pick up our son at 1 a.m, we were out. It didn't matter when. Somebody was always outside walking their golden retriever or pushing a stroller in their perfectly coordinated athleisure outfits. It literally felt like we were in a simulation. It felt relentlessly curated, the Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show. Yeah, we were on a set. It was unnerving, to say the least.
Yeah, I think they call those planned communities with an HOA, and they are very disturbing to go through.
Oh, but everywhere we went, everywhere in this particular area, it was honestly, I'm so happy to be back home where I don't know, shit's a little crazy around here. It's New York, so it's going to have some extra flavor, but
the grime makes things interesting, for sure.
Agree. Even my kids were like, oh my God, it's the same thing every day. Anyway, beautiful area. So if anybody finds out what I'm talking about, it's really nice. It's just not for me. You know what is for me?
What's that?
True crime.
I think we knew that.
Extra true crime, which
I think we also knew that.
Exists over on patreon.com/psychopediapod. Whatever. I had a good segue and then I fucked it up.
I know, I just interrupted you twice in a row and just totally blew your train of thought up. So sorry. Hey, Slater, why don't you tell us about patreon.com/psychopediapod, where people can go get more of what they like if they like what we do here.
Okay, well, you just delivered that whole thing. So what's my job here going to be today, Tony? Patreon.com/psychopediapod. We have extra true crime content. We have behind the scenes. We have private chats. We have the opportunity for you guys to guest co-host with me on a Patreon episode. We have ad-free episodes over there, which release the same day as the public episodes with ads release. So if you don't want to sit through ads, that's an excellent option. I said excellent weird. That's okay. And also, Girl on Gore episodes drop early over on Patreon. Also, while I'm talking about Girl on Gore, we are approaching the end of season 1. So I definitely recommend that you guys take a listen to Girl on Gore. Like I said, it drops in the Psychopedia feed. It is my other podcast series. It is just disastrous.
It's pretty messed up, man.
Yeah, it's like
pretty messed up. I cannot believe how it ended. It was, it kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. I got real dark with it. It's really graphic. There's no rules over there. All right, I'm going to hit you guys with a few Patreon names right now, some shout outs because they deserve it. I want to thank all of my patrons so much for supporting me, for sharing and giving your hard-earned money, whether you're the $5 tier or the $10 tier. Whatever you contribute, I am so grateful. I know that, sharing your hard-earned money is a commitment, and I really appreciate that. And I, in turn, will give you all of me. I will give you everything I got in the way of true crime. So this week, I just want to give give propers to a few new ones. We have Ivy League of Evil, which, excellent.
Nice.
Learned. Jessica Nava. Mutated, which makes me feel like maybe I said mutated or mutilated incorrectly at some point, and somebody picked up on that, and now their name is Mutated. Jolly Rager. Sick. Skylar B. And I can't wait to share with you guys the latest Patreon member whose name is Firefighter Dave. He is now on Patreon. He is active in the chats. He is going to have some posting capabilities or moderator capabilities or whatever. But whatever, he has a presence over there. So check it out. And welcome to everyone who's new. Welcome to all of, my old members over there. Thank you for coming back. The people who have been here since the beginning, you guys are the realest of the real, and I am so grateful for your continued loyalty. If it is your first time here, welcome. And if it's said it weird, again, if it is your,
142nd,
then welcome home, freak. So happy to have everybody, and I really just kind of want to jump right into the case now and issue an overarching trigger warning. Again, this is an absolutely horrific two-parter. You would expect nothing less for a sadistic September case on Psychopedia, but it's not pleasant, okay? So I love you all. I'm sorry for doing this to you, and let's go. In October 1983, Leonard Lake, a former Marine, Vietnam vet, and self-described quote-unquote chubby survivalist, settled into the sagging brown fabric of a recliner chair and fixed his cold green eyes on a tripod-mounted camera. Burly, balding, and dressed in a checkered shirt and scuffed brown boots, Leonard casually lounged like he was about to record a dad joke rather than explain his sadistic intentions in a violent manifesto. With unnerving calm, Leonard opened his mouth and began to outline his plans. He looked at the camera and he said,
"This take is going to be the lead-in of various phases of construction of a building, a secret room, if we can call it that will house a cell, a jail cell, if you will. The purpose of that cell will be the imprisonment of a young lady who probably at this moment is unknown to me."
End quote. From there, Leonard drifted into a tinfoil hat type of monologue about humanity's impending collapse, which will include wars, famine, and full-blown nuclear annihilation. And in Leonard's dead eyes, only those with the foresight to build mountain bunkers stocked with food, weapons, and cash would survive. But you see, Leonard's vision of survival didn't just include canned beans, a rifle, and extra rolls of toilet paper. No. At the center of his doomsday preparation plan were his balls to put it bluntly, because his real mission was to construct a private underground lair in which he could indulge his darkest, most disturbed sexual fantasies with unconsenting women, free from the constraints of law, morality, or mercy. In the video footage, Leonard went on to say, quote,
"For anyone that is interested, anyone who needs my justification and my rationalizations as to why I would want to imprison and, in fact, enslave a woman, they have only to look at me. I'm a realist. I'm not particularly attractive to women. All the traditional magnets, the money, position, power, I don't have. And yet, I'm still very sexually active, and I'm still very much attracted to a particular type of woman who, almost by definition, is totally uninterested in me. Dirty old man. Pervert."
End quote. Then, Leonard goes on to describe the type of woman, or in some cases, girl, he is attracted to. They can be as young as 12, though 18 to 22 is pretty much his ideal age range. He likes women who are slim, very pretty, petite, small-breasted, and have long hair. But what Leonard doesn't like, having been through 2 divorces and at least 55 sexual partners, is having to be social with women. In his words, quote, and I'm going to try and get into character here a little bit, guys, but I'm not an actress, so bear with me.
"I enjoy using women, and, of course, women aren't particularly interested in being used. I certainly enjoy sex. I certainly enjoy the dominance of climbing on a woman and using her body. But I'm not particularly interested in the id, the ego, all the things that a man should be interested in to complete a woman's needs. What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired or satiated or bored or not interested, I simply want to put her away, lock her up in a little room, get her out of my sight, out of my life, and thus avoid what heretofore has always been the obligation to entertain or amuse or satisfy a particular woman's or girlfriend's whims of emotional whatevers."
End quote. Leonard explains how he knows that this violates human rights and, quote, blah, 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 blah. But what he wants is a sex slave, or as he referred to it, as an off-the-shelf sex partner. A few days after making that video, which obviously is a lot longer than what I read, I just kind of cherry-picked certain sections to deliver to you, Leonard turned his camera on once again to continue recording what would infamously go on to become known as the philosophy tape. I will tell you now so that you know exactly what you are in for with this case, that the philosophy tape does not just refer to these like one-man soliloquy videos. It winds up being a collection, a grotesque series of manifesto-type rants coupled with sexual violence and homicidal brutality against real victims, including women, men, and, sadly, also children. So in essence, the philosophy tape amounted to several snuff films in which innocent people were shown being raped, tortured, and ultimately murdered. And the level of depravity involved in these crimes cannot even be adequately explained. For example, I say as I try to explain, one chained-up woman was filmed pleading on behalf of her child who was being tortured in front of her panic-stricken eyes. Another woman, while tied naked to a chair, was shown being told by Leonard on video, "You'll wash for us, clean for us, fuck for us." And if you're wondering what or who us refers to, well, Leonard Lake, as depraved, sadistic, and horrifyingly precise as he was in his cruelty, didn't act alone. He had an equally monstrous accomplice named Charles Ng. And together, Charles and Leonard didn't just kill, they fused into something so much more chilling than 2 predators operating alone. They became a team. One of the rarest and most terrifying dynamics in the world of serial killers, a partnership built on sadism, control, and mutual reinforcement of their darkest impulses. Between them, they are believed to have annihilated anywhere from 11 to 25 lives, snuffed out with cold precision. Entire families were erased. And the tragedy wasn't just in the astronomical body count, but in the psychology of what they did and how they did it. So please understand that what you're about to hear isn't just disturbing. It's devastating on like a visceral level. Because this is the case of serial killers Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, aka the Snuff Film Killers.
Oh boy, Slater.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
That was a big intro. That was a long intro, I realized, but had to set the stage.
I have a question for you about serial killer teams, which maybe we go on to talk about later. With two men teaming up like that, do you know if that's the most common form? Because I know like the duo thing is very, very uncommon just to begin with. But like, do you know if that breaks down like on a gender basis? I think we talked about, I don't remember what episode we talked about that in.
You're thinking, we did
like,
talk about this. We talked about this in our Ken and Barbie Killers episode, which was like the second or third.
billion years ago? Yeah.
Yeah. And we also talked about it, but they weren't serial killers. The case that we talked about where a couple teamed up and they killed, but like tortured first, their nanny, their au pair, if you recall that
right.
episode.
Yeah.
The most common duo in terms of serial killing duos are two men. The least common are two women. And then in between is a man and a woman.
Oh, interesting. I feel like I knew that, but like, it just seems like it would be like the Bonnie and Clyde thing would be the most prevalent for some reason.
Yeah. Okay, so let's learn about these fuckwads, shall we? Leonard Thomas Lake was born on October 29th, 1945 at St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco, California. His father, 21-year-old U.S. Navy sailor Elgin Lake, was a heavy drinker prone to volatile arguments with Leonard's mother, Gloria. Despite their toxic and unstable relationship, the couple went on to have two more children, Leonard's sister and brother, Sylvia and Donald, because why not? Let's throw kids into this horrible marriage. But not long after the birth of their third child, Elgin walked out and abandoned the entire family, disappearing into Seattle. He left Gloria on her own in public housing, trying to raise three kids with cupboards that were essentially bare. Forget extras for the children like toys, medication, new clothing. Gloria was barely managing to keep food on the table. So, desperate and feeling like she was out of options, Gloria made the decision to leave San Francisco to follow her deadbeat husband to Seattle, clinging to the hope that he might be convinced to act like a father and support his struggling family. At the time, Leonard was just a kindergartner, and Gloria, unsure of exactly what she'd find in Seattle, decided to leave him behind with his grandparents just in case the move didn't work out. And this separation not only devastated, understandably, 6-year-old Leonard, but it left an indelible mark upon his still-forming psyche that would go on to manifest in pathological distrust, deep-rooted resentment, and ultimately, violent compulsions. The day his mother and siblings left, young Leonard sobbed uncontrollably and physically clung to Gloria's skirt while begging her to take him with them, which is honestly heartbreaking.
Devastating for a 6-year-old to like, oh, your whole family's just going to like leave you behind with your grandparents and go hours, hundreds of miles away somewhere else. Like after your dad already took off, it's devastating.
It's so sad. And, obviously 6 years old, he's not thinking to himself like, oh, my mom's doing what she thinks is best for me. I've already started school. My siblings are younger. So, she can just take them. It's easier.
Yeah, there's no, like the rationalizing that in the mind of the 6-year-old is I'm being abandoned by almost literally everybody at this point.
And he was. From that moment on, Leonard never lived with either of his parents ever again, even though Gloria and his two siblings, Sylvia and Donald, wound up coming back to San Francisco less than a year after they left. Talk about abandonment issues. They came back and he still didn't live with them. Many have speculated that this moment in time marked a significant turning point in Leonard's life and that the trauma of being emotionally discarded at such a young age shattered something inside of him, and that it was the first crack in what would become a deeply fractured, dangerous mind. After Gloria and Leonard's siblings returned to San Francisco, Leonard, who remained in the care of his grandparents, developed into a very, very overtly sexual child with an unhealthy sexual fixation on his sister, Sylvia.
Ew.
Pop quiz. What factor may have fueled/definitely fueled Leonard's heightened preoccupation with sex at such a young age? A, his grandmother instructed him to photograph Sylvia naked in order to develop an artistic appreciation of the human body. B, Leonard accidentally tuning into scrambled cable porn late at night and becoming addicted. C, Leonard being taught by an older cousin that masturbation and orgasm was the only true way to experience love.
Ooh. Okay. Well, it definitely, I don't think is B, because we're in like 1945. Well, a little bit we're like early 1950s and scrambled late night cable porn.
Mid-50s, but okay.
Yeah, definitely. There was no HBO in 1950. So definitely not B.
Well,
Sorry.
Fuck me, yes.
Your anachronism did not work there.
Wonderful.
Now, here's the problem, though, is that the other two are really good. So,
All right, well, that's something.
Photographing his sister, which is really super gross, or C, being taught by an older cousin. I don't know. They're both equally messed up and both equally likely. I'm just going to go C, I think.
Okay, you are incorrect, but
Well, shit.
you really like put me to shame with B, so I think this is just not our best showing, either one of us, this pop quiz.
Yeah, it's a good old swing and a miss there.
The answer is A. His grandmother would instruct him to photograph Sylvia naked so that he could develop an artistic appreciation for the human body.
That's maybe more messed up than the cousin one.
Yeah, oh, it definitely is. And this was very formative and planted a lifelong obsession with taking nude photographs of a legion of women over the course of his worthless life. Also, Leonard's early fixation on Sylvia went on to manifest into full-on abuse as he forced her to perform oral sex on him when they were both still children. Now, living with his grandparents in the middle-class Glen Park district of San Francisco was about as Norman Rockwell as Leonard's life was ever going to get. He had food, clothing, a steady allowance, even summer camp in the mountains with clean lakes and fresh pine air. Nice visual, right? Like little Lenny roasting marshmallows instead of abusing his poor sister for a change. Even in adulthood, the smell of pine would drag him back to those happy times, his one safe space before the rot set in officially, even though it really did because he was abusing his sister. Which makes it no accident that he built his bunker, part survival shelter, part torture dungeon, in those very mountains, surrounded by pine trees and silence. It wasn't just strategic, it was symbolic. He was returning to the one outlet that he had when the darkness in his life first took root. Leonard turned his childhood playground into his adult playground. From pine needles to pain rituals, from summer camp kumbayas to survivalist sadism, from Boy Scout to butcher. Call it full circle fuckery. When Leonard was about 8 or 9, the cracks in his kid facade started really showing, and what came out was pure pathology with the side of future Netflix doc. Because he got his sticky little hands on a little at-home chemistry set and started cooking up his own Breaking Bad meets Pet Sematary experiments. We're talking acid, household chemicals, and a growing obsession with watching things die. First, it was insects. Then, it was mice.
I can't believe that we're only at 8 or 9 years old. I really thought that we had jumped ahead quite a bit further in the timeline.
Depravity started very young for Leonard Lake. But Leonard didn't just kill these insects and mice outright. Nope, our budding Bundy had a flair for wanting things to die slowly and painfully. First, he built these elaborate miniature cities, including mazes, tunnels, castles, even a tiny train, like some deranged dollhouse architect with a god complex. Then he would release his unsuspecting little subjects into their kingdom, let them explore and roam, before snuffing them out and watching them die. And when the curtain closed, Lenny Boy would toss their tiny bodies, sometimes still twitching, into acid baths to watch them bubble and melt into green sludge. Equal parts mad scientist, equal parts sadist, 0 parts healthy child. Especially when you add in the fact that young Leonard also lit his own bedroom on fire. Because of course he did. At that point, he was already exhibiting 2 out of the 3 red flags on the McDonald triad, which we know includes animal torture, arson, and bedwetting, aka the serial killer starter pack. Some people call it a triad. We here at Psychopedia Central call it the Arby's Octagon. And Leonard, he was a fucked up combo meal with a hair in the fries. Ugh.
Gross. Slater?
As adulthood loomed, something new began to burrow into Leonard's psyche and absolutely consume his thoughts with relentless intensity. Pop quiz.
Oh, okay.
What specifically began to consume Leonard's thoughts? Okay, so we're talking like he's entering into adulthood around 18. A, the idea that he was being spied on by government agents seeking to silence him forever. B, a thriller novel titled The Collector, in which a lonely young man kidnapped a female student in London and held her captive in the cellar of his rural farmhouse. C, taking his own life using a chainsaw so as to evoke maximum psychological damage on whomever would find him.
Wow. You've stepped it up from question 1 to question 2, most certainly.
Well, thank fuck, because I have been beating myself up ever since Pop 1 ended in flames.
So I'm going to go with B. I'm going to go with a thriller novel titled The Collector.
You are correct. The answer is B. All right. So it's giving Joel Rifkin, is it not? With Alfred Hitchcock's film, The Frenzy Frenzy?
For sure.
So Leonard Lake did the same thing, just with the book. Just as Rifkin internalized frenzy, Leonard became fixated on The Collector, which, as I said, was a novel that centers on a lonely, disturbed butterfly collector who kidnaps a young woman named Miranda and holds her captive in a cellar. Now, understand this, yes? Leonard did not just read it. He fucking lived it over and over and over in his mind's eye. He compulsively and obsessively replayed the imagery and drew erotic satisfaction from the idea of a beautiful, helpless woman locked away and reduced to nothing more than a vessel for her captor's darkest urges. A woman stripped of agency and denied any chance of escape, reduced to nothing more than an object with a heartbeat, fully at the mercy of her captor's control. In fact, when Leonard finally set his fantasies into motion, he christened the whole thing Operation Miranda, after the woman in the book. For Leonard, The Collector truly went on to become a blueprint for depravity. But before that happened, on July 27th, 1964, Leonard moved out of his grandparents' house and enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps. Weapons fascinated him. Shocking, especially fire control techniques and rifle tactics. He had a particular fondness for studying chemical agents, guerrilla warfare, explosives, and demolition. You know, the usual interests of someone casually preparing to outlive humanity and blow up whatever's left while using and abusing sex slaves.
Do you know what fire control techniques is? Because I don't know if I've ever heard that term used before.
In the context of military, fire control encompasses tactics, technology, and processes used to direct weapon systems onto a target. You're talking integrating sensors, digital systems. It could also mean, my understanding is it can also mean dispersing fires for maximum effect, like blowing shit up.
Oh.
And fire discipline, like reining it in. You know what I mean?
Got it. Okay. Got it. That makes sense.
In the Marines, Leonard learned how to masterfully read maps, field survival techniques, and even took specialized classes to become a radar technician, as well as advanced classes in aircraft radar work. This motherfucker was getting an education. He was shipped out to Vietnam, too bad he wasn't killed there, before being relocated to Camp Lejeune, too bad he didn't get cancer there, before ultimately returning back to the U.S. and getting married to a young woman named Karen Lee, too bad she didn't castrate him, who he actually met through some of his relatives. But instead of settling down with Karen, Leonard signed up for a second tour in Vietnam because, as he stated, it was quote-unquote enjoyable. And why in the fresh hell was it enjoyable to be in Vietnam? Well, because he got to, quote, kill a lot of people. To Leonard, the hardest part of the whole thing wasn't the trauma of war, but rather zipping up those pesky body bags. Charming.
Yeah, probably the only person to actually ever say that about the Vietnam War. I mean, that was a horrible thing. And was the first one that was publicly televised back in the States. I mean, that was why there was so much like backlash during that time against the Vietnam War, because that was the first time they had like cameras on the ground in an active conflict, broadcasting live. And like, so everybody could see it and witness it and view it at the same time. And that was like so much of like the collective like pushback against it. And for him to like now come and be like, oh, yeah, this was great. This was fun. It's just like a beach vacation to Tulum with my buds. It's like,
Right.
bro, that's
I mean,
depraved.
that's fucked up on a whole other level. Like,
Yeah, depraved.
to use the word enjoyable and to voluntarily go back to Vietnam is something else entirely. Now, this isn't to say that Leonard wasn't unraveling, because he was, but not in the same way as his fellow soldiers who were breaking under the weight of combat trauma. Leonard's mental distress came from a darker, more disturbing place, because he wasn't haunted by guilt or plagued by vivid flashbacks or PTSD. Rather, what gnawed at him was a different four-letter acronym: FOMO. Because during his second tour, he'd been reassigned to a radar repair unit, which meant no more active killing. And for Leonard, that was the real torment. He even went to see a military mental health practitioner in Da Nang who diagnosed him with impending schizophrenia and hysterical neurosis, and recommended that Leonard be sent back to the States for hospital treatment. So by the end of 1970, Leonard returned back to California, where doctors formally declared him a danger to himself and others. He spent 2 months confined to a psychiatric ward and managed to leave only once in order to execute a bizarre little mission of his own, which was to raid a government-owned storage site in search of what he believed was important information. Of course, he came up empty-handed when he did this raid, but in true Leonard Lake fashion, he didn't blame the failure of this quote-unquote mission on his own delusions. He blamed it on, you tell me. We got another pop quiz. These are coming in hot today.
Yeah, they sure are.
Pop quiz, what did he blame the failure of his mission on? A, diarrhea. B, a female security guard that distracted him with her X chromosomes. C, a devilish voice in his head that intentionally misguided him.
Okay. I feel like B is also a trick, because you're playing into all the other stuff that you've already said in the intro. C, a devilish voice. A, diarrhea. I mean, diarrhea is the funniest, but I think that you made that one up for sure. So let's go C, a devilish voice in his head.
Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha. Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha is the answer.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, let me go get some Pepto real quick.
What is that from? Diarrhea, cha-cha-cha?
I have no idea.
Am I the only one? No? Okay, well, Lorenzo, our sound engineer, is shaking his head and looking at me like I'm on crack. Why do I have this image of me and my sister being like, diarrhea, cha-cha-cha? All right, anybody out there knows?
I think it was a Pepto ad. Wasn't that a Pepto ad from like the early 90s?
Oh, shit. I think it might have been.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, it was around the same time like the Raisinets were on air and like all that stuff.
We were going to Jazzercise. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, diarrhea, this little fucking idiot.
Movies.
Leonard said that he failed the mission because he had diarrhea. So he returned back to his bed. Remember, this is when he was in the psychiatric facility. And he proceeded to eat a shit ton, pun intended, of chocolate, which he said would constipate him so that he could return to his mission. At this point, he was officially discharged from the Marine Corps in 1971 due to medical reasons. But so you're letting him go due to psychiatric issues, but also you're letting him go due to psychiatric issues? Isn't that a little bit counterintuitive? He's in a psychiatric institution, presumably, for sure, because it's acknowledged that he needs assistance.
Wouldn't that be like a military psychiatric institution though? So like if he was discharged from the military, he would have to go to like the VA's office and like all that kind of stuff to like resume care. I don't know how that worked in this time period, to be honest with you. So.
No, but that makes sense. Yes, it was a military hospital where he was being treated, but you let him out when he was deemed, a danger to himself and others. You're releasing him from the military due to psychiatric reasons. And then there's just, this is my thing in general, where is the follow-up? Like, are you relying on Leonard Lake, future serial killer, to go check himself in somewhere else? You know what I mean?
Sure.
You just release these individuals from care, and then we all throw our hands up shocked when they go on to do things that are, not great.
Yeah, was probably handed a recommendation of like, hey, here's some facilities where you can go seek other treatment in, but we don't have any more support for you here anymore. Unfortunately, it's like particularly in like military care after they've served time, that's unfortunately a very consistent issue and has been a consistent issue for a long, long, long time.
Right. Again, I stand by, what I'm always sort of saying in these episodes. Like, it's really, really just such a fucking shame. Like, if we can just stay on the proactive side of things rather than just responding on the reactive side of things, a lot more people would not die in such brutal ways. Now, for a little while, things almost looked quote unquote normal. I know that's not like a great word to use nowadays, but things looked steady. Leonard and his wife Karen bought a modest home in San Jose. They enrolled at West Valley Junior College, and they started looking for steady work. But stability was never Leonard's strong suit. He only managed to land low-wage part-time jobs, a la Joel Rifkin, and instead of hustling harder, he redirected his frustration toward Karen. Leonard pressured her into becoming a topless dancer, not just to cover the bills because, she could have gone into a restaurant, maybe become a waitress, whatever, but because he got off on the idea of other men watching his wife dance naked. He got off on her submission. He got off on the idea that other men would want what he had. Karen eventually caved and decided to, acquiesce, and she took a job as a topless dancer. And she worked 40 to 50 hours a week in a strip club while Leonard stayed home, stewing, tightening his control and pocketing every dime she earned. His rules also grew stranger and darker. He dictated, for example, that Karen could read only one book. Take a guess what book that was. The Collector.
I wonder.
He micromanaged her life down to the page that she was allowed to turn. And then came what he chillingly referred to as quote-unquote controlled beatings. Sessions where he punched Karen in the face while asking if she enjoyed the punishment like he did. Because for Leonard, the beatings were just foreplay, which always led into sex. He constantly ordered Karen to pose nude for his camera, a la Jerry Brudos. Remember, he made his wife pose nude for him and do all kinds of strange shit. She had to pose and straddle their children's tricycle. Remember all that?
Yeah, it's really strange. Very strange.
Yep. And then Leonard told Karen that he wanted to start swinging with other couples, that he could no longer orgasm with just her alone. According to Karen, Leonard was the only person that she'd ever known who truly possessed a God complex. And the thing is, Leonard didn't just exhibit control or superiority. He genuinely believed that he was godlike. Though it wasn't in a delusional, psychotic sense that someone with, say, full-blown schizophrenia might experience, Leonard was not psychotic in the clinical sense. He wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't hearing voices that were commanding him to do things. He was psychopathic with narcissistic and sadistic traits who consciously chose to elevate himself to the role of God. In his mind, he had the right to decide who lived, who died, and what purpose others served in his twisted kingdom. Morality didn't apply to him. Only dominance and control.
Was he diagnosed with PTSD after being discharged?
No, he was not.
Interesting.
Things got so bad and so violent between Karen and Leonard that she wound up moving into the camper that they owned until finally being able to afford an apartment in which to live alone. Leonard, though, eventually broke into that apartment and burned holes in all of her clothing with acid to punish her. He threatened her and warned her that she was always being watched, either by him or by somebody working for him, a la Cameron Hooker, and that he would never give her up, as she was his possession to control. And I say a la Cameron Hooker, I'm bringing us all back once again to the Colleen Stan case. If you recall, she was kept prisoner for so long and abused for so long. And he told her, you are always being watched. You can never escape. So even when she had ample opportunity to escape, she never took those opportunities. I mean, eventually, thank God she did. But for years and years and years and years, she was kept under that control and truly believed that she would never be able to survive an escape attempt.
Yeah, because it was some like secret like government organization
Yeah, he
type
called
thing
it-
that he told it. Yeah.
That's exactly right. He called it
The
the
society?
company. The company.
The company. Right.
Still, though, Tony, pretty good that you remember that.
My brain works some days, other days not so much.
According to Leonard, he had eyes and ears everywhere and was perpetually monitoring Karen's every move. Finally, thankfully, in 1972, Karen filed for divorce. I actually looked
Good
into
for her.
this because I was curious to know how common or uncommon it was for a woman to file for divorce in 1972.
Mhm.
And I learned that California was the first state in the U.S. to adopt no-fault divorce, which went into effect January 1st, 1970. So like right before she filed. And basically that just means that a spouse no longer needed to prove wrongdoing like adultery, abuse, or abandonment to be granted a divorce. The grounds could simply be irreconcilable differences.
I guess I've never thought about when that came into U.S. law or state level law anyways.
Wait, I'm going to say something and I don't mean it disrespectfully.
Yes.
It's because you're a man.
Also, I've never been married. I don't have children. You know,
Maybe. But like,
a lot of
I
reasons.
feel like my mind is always wired like, we didn't always have the protections and, that we have today. Like my mind immediately went to like, when were women allowed to do this?
That's actually what I was about to say was that I'm very conflicted on whether I'm surprised that it happened so late, thinking that it had been in effect at least somewhere earlier than that in the States.
Right. Anyway, according to Leonard's half-sister Janet, the divorce marked a turning point in Leonard's life. The moment when his quiet resentment toward women hardened into a fierce, festering hatred. He was already carrying the scars of a childhood shaped by abandonment, mostly from his mother, whose departure had planted a deep-rooted distrust of all women. But when Karen left him, it wasn't just a rejection. It was, to Leonard, a full-circle betrayal. One more woman walking away. One more person reminding him that he wasn't in control. And from that point on, Leonard didn't just distrust women, he despised them. But he also wanted to plant his pathetic, puny flag on all of their vaginas. His grand vision of dominance translated into him placing personal ads in the Berkeley Barb, which was a counterculture paper where sex and sleaze were only ever a classified away. And that's where he met a woman named Jennifer Gordon. With Jennifer, Leonard leaned hard into his obsession. He tied her up, forced her into submission, and snapped endless nude photographs of her in degrading, suggestive poses, even while she was asleep and not consenting. But soon enough, the still images weren't cutting it for him, and Leonard escalated. And this is when he told Jennifer point blank that what he really wanted was to make a snuff film.
I have just one quick question in regards to that. We're still in San Francisco or are we in San Jose? We're still in the Bay Area, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So he was in San Jose with Karen,
Yes.
and then he goes back to San Francisco.
After he and Karen split.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting context just with the kind of like sexual revolution stuff that's happening at the time of the mid-70s, which kind of honestly was really centered within San Francisco. So it might kind of seem strange to think that, oh, here's this like counterculture, like magazine, paper, whatever, that like people were putting like sex classifieds into, but also like this is like the kind of epicenter of a lot of those sort of movements
Sexplosion.
of the time. Yeah, for sure, in a big way.
So this may seem silly to go into for people who already know what this is, but I kind of learned what a snuff film was later in life. So I would like to, give a little explanation of what it is. For anybody who's blessed enough not to know what a snuff film is, what it is a pornographic film that depicts one person literally murdering another, usually during climax. The concept of the snuff film hit mainstream paranoia in the 1970s, especially after the release of a 1976 exploitation movie called Snuff, hence the name. marketed with the tagline, quote, "the film that could only be made in South America where life is cheap,"
Wow.
end quote.
Wow.
It
Wow, the
featured
racism.
a scene in which a woman appeared to be murdered on camera after having sex with a hooded man. In reality, though, just not everybody knows this, the murder in that movie was staged, and the producers tacked on the killing scene as like a marketing gimmick to cash in on the moral panic of the era. While Snuff the movie did not invent the idea of filmed real-life murders made for profit, it did supercharge it into like urban legend. And I say urban legend because despite decades of rumor and a few law enforcement investigations, the commercial snuff film, which is defined as a murder recorded on camera for the purpose of distribution and profit, has never been conclusively proven to exist. Isn't that interesting? There have been real murder videos, of course, but they've generally fallen into other categories like war footage, gang executions, true crime evidence, or the increasingly common realm of shock websites. There was one oft-cited, case in Mexico in the late 1980s involving a murder allegedly filmed for sale, but even that remains heavily disputed. Anyway, when Leonard told Jennifer that he wanted to make a snuff film, she voiced her concern that it would probably just wind up landing him in jail if he did.
As it kind of should. But,
You think?
Just a little bit.
Pop quiz.
Oh, okay.
What was the reason Leonard provided to Jennifer for not being too worried about jail? A, he said he still had military contacts who would help him escape. B, he said he was smarter than every single prosecutor in California and that he would never be convicted. C, he said he'd just take cyanide to escape the consequences.
Okay. So we have military contacts, being smarter than everybody, or taking the exit path with cyanide. Again, I don't think that he wants to end his own life. It doesn't strike me as a person who is of that mentality, at least at this point in time. So I don't think that it's C. I want to say it's B. I mean, that just plays right into the God complex, which probably means that it's wrong and you set me up for failure here, but I'm pretty sure that it's B.
All right. Final answer?
Yeah, final answer.
Yep, you're wrong, my friend.
Yeah, I figured.
So I actually really can appreciate your thinking. The answer is C, that he said that he would just take a cyanide pill and end his life and escape
interesting.
the consequences of prison.
Interesting. I wasn't picking that up in his personality at this point in time.
No,
where he'd like threaten to like off himself as like a control mechanism.
Keep in mind, exactly right. He has to be in control. And if it means ending his own life to escape being under everyone else's control for the rest of his life, the state and attorneys and prison guards, you know what I mean? He will take the control, and he will end his life.
Well, and you see that in like abusive and manipulative relationships where like somebody will threaten to kill themselves just to like assert control over the situation and like emotionally manipulate the other party. It's rather a common occurrence.
Yeah. Eventually, Jennifer broke up with Leonard, smart woman, after he pinned her to the ground with his foot, and she decided that she had enough of his escalating violence, because that's what we're seeing now with Leonard, right? And you can see where the progression was, right? He started by taking pictures. He started with like a little bit of, rough sex, we'll call it, but consensual, it would seem in the beginning, until it escalated into actual violence, physical abuse. And then, in this case, moving on to wanting to take photographs. Okay, now we're going to take photographs of her when she's sleeping and she's not giving me her consent. Now I'm going to see if she would help me to land a snuff film, gig. It's a total escalation. It's a little bit textbook. You're kind of boring, Leonard. You're kind of boring and predictable. By this point, Leonard had distilled his life's purpose down to two main obsessions. One, owning a sex slave, and two, preparing for the inevitable nuclear apocalypse. And building out an isolated bunker would cater to both of those things. So he packed up his shit and drove out to Ukiah, which is about 130 miles north of San Francisco and nestled in a valley between two mountain ranges. Only about 12,000 residents lived there at the time, and it was a quiet, small-towny kind of spot. Leonard took a job with a government-funded group that built and renovated low-income housing and enrolled in college courses again that focused on, drumroll please, animal sciences and meat cutting.
Ew, gross, that's not vegan.
He was literally getting an education on how to slice meat with various tools and how to expertly cut through bone and flesh. Big yikes.
Gross.
Leonard joined a commune at the Greenfield Ranch, a 5,600-acre settlement that was divided into quads, and he lived there for the next 8 years with other hippie-type people looking to drop out of mainstream society, grow their own food, and marinate in the sweet scent of marijuana, patchouli, and questionable personal boundaries.
I honestly, though, like, it's kind of interesting how immersed in the sort of hippie culture this guy is.
He wants to be off the grid. He is like a moth to a flame. He's taking himself further and further away from civilization, and he's attracted very much to this isolated lifestyle where he's not being watched, where, accountability is a little bit lower because you don't subscribe to the same rules as everybody else.
Sure.
It's really actually like a perfect trajectory, if you will.
It's kind of that anti-authority sort of mentality
Anti-establishment, and exactly.
Yeah.
So during his stint at the Commune, Leonard was less about peace, love, and harmony, and more about staging the world's worst-rated orgy. He was obsessed with throwing sex parties and lobbied hard for a clothing-optional policy on the ranch that, in this case, really just meant everyone naked all the timey. That's what he was going for. Let me say something. This is like off the script here, obviously. I don't want to see people naked all of the time. How is that even attractive? Like, there was a Seinfeld episode where Jerry Seinfeld was dating a woman who walked around naked all the time. And in the beginning, he was like, oh, yeah, this is fucking rad. And then she tried opening a pickle jar naked. And you could just see her, like, her muscles, like, popping out in weird places and, like, her chest kind of caving in as she's really working that pickle jar. And all of a sudden, he's like, this fucking sucks. Like, I only want to see you naked when, it's sexy time. Otherwise, I just don't need to see you, like, sitting down reading the newspaper naked.
Desensitizes.
It does.
A little bit.
That's maybe the more mature way of saying what I was going for. But, like, yeah, it's not as exciting. Whatever. On repeat occasions, Leonard prowled around propositioning fellow residents on the commune, asking if he could snap nude photos of them or action shots of them mid-hookup, usually dangling a baggie of weed in front of them like it was currency. Imagine being cornered by a random dude building his pervert portfolio, offering you a dime bag in exchange for starring in his low-budget porno fantasy. Leonard's entire commune personality was asking people to be naked, asking to take their pictures, and also, which you're going to hear in a second, ranting and raving about the future apocalypse that was about to annihilate everyone except him because he was going to be prepared. On one occasion, Leonard asked a woman named Gina to pose naked with the commune's prized unicorn goat, whose name was Sir Lancelot. This majestic beast was less myth and more mutilation, sadly, because a local black magic priest named Otter had literally sawed off Sir Lancelot's second horn at birth to leave just the one. So instead of a radiant stallion galloping across a meadow, you've got a limping farm animal with a botched head job now being staged in Leonard's pervert photo ops. For an entire year, Leonard used the mutilated unicorn goat to coerce women and girls into posing for photos with the magical being. He coerced a 16-year-old girl named Cindy, who'd been visiting the area with her mom, to put on bright red lipstick and pose topless with Sir Lancelot while he took countless photographs. Another girl named Darlene, who was just 15 years old and lured by the goat, lost her virginity to Leonard after he spent weeks grooming her before ultimately coercing her into having sex with him in his bed, aka raping her. Darlene actually continued to see Leonard until her parents eventually caught on and sent her away to a boarding school, although even then, she apparently actually continued to see Leonard, like on the DL.
Jeez.
Poor thing. Leonard eventually accumulated dozens upon dozens of photo albums of naked women and young girls, a visual testament to his manipulative reach. And he really was, as much as I hate to say it, by all accounts, charming and charismatic, which of course we know are hallmark traits of psychopathy. Years later, social behaviorists would dissect his remarkable success with women, noting his ability to switch his charm on and off with surgical precision. And this is the essence of psychopathy, an absence of empathy masked by a curated social veneer weaponized to exploit. Women were drawn in, disarmed by his charisma, and subtly coerced into crossing personal boundaries and engaging in sexual acts outside their experience or comfort zone, posing for photographs they might otherwise have refused until compliance felt less like a choice and more like inevitability. Most of his interactions with the male residents on the commune centered on Leonard holding court on the inevitable collapse of civilization, pontificating about the urgent need to stockpile food, weapons, ammo, water, and other essentials in a fortified underground bunker. He delivered sermons like some self-appointed prophet, full of inflated self-importance and zero self-awareness. At this point, Leonard was also burglarizing local shops and stealing power tools like a chainsaw, rifles, handguns, again, ammunition, and several boxes of dynamite. Why did he need all of this, by the way? Because he's going to get moving soon on building his underground bunker. Eventually, he was caught stealing. He spent a few nights in jail, was placed on a 1 year's probation, and then got kicked off the commune by the other residents. But it was after this incident in particular that Leonard vowed that he would absolutely never allow himself to be incarcerated again. So this is like a further confirmation that I would rather die than see myself behind bars. At this point, in 1980, Leonard met and eventually married his second wife, a woman named Clara Lynn Ballas, a.k.a. Cricket, who became involved in Lake's fantasies and willingly and enthusiastically appeared in many of his pornographic films and photos. It's like he kind of met his match in Cricket. After relocating to Philo, California and burying $30,000 in silver,
It's a lot of silver.
Leonard took a job managing a motel. Might be a good time to dig up some of that bling, you know what I mean? But that motel gig provided a setup that conveniently doubled as his personal playground because it gave Leonard ample privacy to have regular sex not only with Cricket, but also with a third partner, 18-year-old Connie Richards, who lived with him in Cricket and engaged in BDSM sex for 3 months. They were like a throuple, basically. After 3 months was up, and after Connie left, which was just 2 weeks before Christmas in 1980, another figure showed up in Leonard's life. A figure who was facing a court-martial in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, and who had slipped away from the authorities. A figure, a fugitive, who needed a safe place to hide. A figure who wound up becoming a literal partner in crime to Leonard Lake in some of the most sadistic and calculated atrocities ever committed on American soil. Enter Charles Ng. Charles was a 5'7", 145-pound, 25-year-old fugitive wearing thick glasses who was ready, willing, and able to provide his labor to motel management. And the fact that he also had an interest in survivalism made him instantly click with his new boss/bestie, Bossy, Leonard Lake. Shortly after meeting, Leonard, Cricket, and Charles left the motel management trade and moved into a 1-story wooden building on a property called Indian Creek Ranch, located 300 yards away from where they were hired to manage a youth camp. But that didn't last long, as very soon after moving in, the FBI received a tip of Charles Ng's whereabouts and deployed 9 FBI agents, 6 sheriff's deputies, several unmarked cars, 1 helicopter, and a fixed-wing aircraft to recapture him. And we're obviously going to go on to hear about what he was running from and all of that.
It's a lot of federal personnel there for...
A fugitive? Wait till you hear what he was running from. When law enforcement raided their home, they discovered 6 handguns, 6 rifles, grenades, TNT, a silencer, tear gas, several boxes of ammo, a MAC-10 assault weapon with a sound suppressor that was converted to fully automatic operation, as well as several martial arts weapons. Because apparently Charles Ng was a nunchuck demon. Needless to say, all 3 musketeers, Charles, Leonard, and Cricket, were arrested and facing up to 17 felony charges.
Just really quick, if you were to tell me that this was a Girl on Gore episode, I would totally 100% believe you.
I know.
So it's like, what a wild group of just like misfits that somehow like managed to find each other.
I'm really glad that you said that, Tony, honestly, because I have been steeped in research for a long time. These serial killer cases, especially two-parters, are...
Oh, sure.
I mean, I'm writing a
Intense,
dissertation, basically. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
it's a load of research. So by the time I distill it down into a script for the podcast, I worry. I'm like, I really, really hope I'm driving home. What a fucking freak show this was. Like, how absolutely off the rails this case is. And when I was writing it, I said to myself the same thing. I was like, am I doing Girl on Gore right now or Psychopedia? Because this is fucked.
Yeah, for real. I mean, you're talking about a dude that got thrown off a hippie commune, right? And then gets arrested for having like a bunch of firearms, silencers, TNT in Northern California. Like, what?
And there's a unicorn goat on the commune. Can we not forget about the unicorn goat?
Right. Yeah. I forgot, but that's horrible. Like, horrible. It's already gone out of my mind. That's, go away. That can go away.
It's just fucking insane is what it is. And it gets worse. So he's arrested, Leonard, along with Charles and Cricket. And remember what I said a bunch of times by this point, but I have to keep driving it home. Leonard had made it crystal clear that he would rather die than ever spend time behind bars. That was his big thing. And yet, he wasn't ready to crack a cyanide capsule just yet either. So, taking a page straight out of Charles Ng's fugitive playbook, Leonard Lake managed to slip the leash. And here's the part that makes the justice system look like it was staffed by drunk interns. He was actually allowed to go home pending a court hearing. After being busted with all of those weapons, they let the piece of shit go.
Those firearm charges are so serious, yeah.
And while he was out, free as a fucking bird, Leonard flapped his scrawny-ass wings and took right off, straight into his grand escape and officially onto the lam. He had become a fugitive. Charles, meanwhile, was quietly shipped back to Hawaii on a military plane, and Cricket was cut loose entirely. So, who was Charles Ng? This mystery man turned fugitive turned survivalist turned weapon hoarder. And how did he end up becoming one half of one of the most sadistic serial killer duos the world has ever seen? I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you exactly who this fuck is. Charles Cheetah Ng was born in Hong Kong on Christmas Eve 1960 to a middle-class family. His parents were Kenneth and Ui Ping. Charles had 2 older sisters, Alice and Betty, and was raised in a 2-bedroom apartment with his parents and sisters, as well as with 2 grandmothers and 2 aunts. As a child, Charles was described as loving and sensitive. He'd make snacks for his sisters after school and would fan them to sleep on hot nights. He also did which of the following things? Pop quiz.
Okay.
A, tried to rescue and hatch supermarket eggs by keeping them warm in his sock drawer. B, learned sign language so he could communicate with a child at school who was deaf. C, cared for a pet chicken whom he'd sneak cheddar cheese to as special treats.
This is a very poultry-themed pop quiz, huh?
Indeed.
So we have either try to hatch supermarket eggs, which is, I think, kind of a misunderstanding of how that actually works a little bit.
Well, you're forgetting the operative word in that, like rescue. He thought he was like saving them so people can't cook them.
Sure. Right, sure. Or he learned sign language, or he cared for a pet chicken. I mean, I don't know what to think here. I'm so upside down. I want to say it's the one that's not involved with chickens because, 2 of them are, but it's probably one of those. And I'm going to guess that it's probably cared for a pet chicken. C. Final answer. Tell me I'm wrong.
Okay, well, the answer is C. He cared for a pet chicken whom he would sneak cheddar cheese to as special treats. He had a little beaked partner in crime, which, if he didn't grow up to become a total fuckwad, would make me really like him. Also, Charles idolized Bruce Lee and got into martial arts very early in life, which is something else that I think is totally adorable. But, literally in anyone else. Charles attended Catholic school at St. Joseph's, but constantly failed to complete his homework and therefore received poor grades, which is something that his father, Kenneth, would absolutely not tolerate and would punish him by tethering him to a window and beating him with a cane or the handle of a feather duster, as Charles's mother would cry out in protest. And while the abuse was happening, Kenneth would tell Charles repeatedly how much he loved him and that he was hurting him because he loved him and that the beatings were for his own good. As a result of this abuse, Charles turned inward and became withdrawn. Then, on top of this, Charles experienced 3 very traumatic incidents. One that involved him coming home to find his beloved pet chicken cooking in a pot on the stove, which is giving Robert Pickton vibes. If you remember, he had a pet calf whom he loved and adored, came home one day,
right, yeah.
and the poor calf was butchered and hanging in the barn. And the death of his chicken, especially in that manner, sent him reeling in isolation in his bedroom for days, understandably.
Yeah, it's your best friend.
Right. Another incident was when his mother released his pet turtle in a pond very far away from their home. And a third incident was when Charles brought home a stray dog and his family simply released the dog in a location where other dogs roamed freely rather than taking the animal into the safety of their home. So basically, all of these traumatic things are friends, companions being taken from Charles and in some cases killed. So basically, he didn't have any pets to call upon for companionship and he spent hours in his bedroom alone reading. Not only that, but he's basically being taught, anytime I get close to anything, it's going to be taken away from me. His parents attempted to get him psychiatric intervention when he was 10. I don't know, maybe don't fucking murder his pets instead. But his behavior only seemed to escalate. Charles began stealing, which is a very typical behavior in a budding serial killer, and also a behavior that wound up biting him in the ass later on after he was arrested for raiding a military armory. We will get to all of this. Charles, as a young child, also began seeking out Western children in parks and assaulting them. He also tossed Molotov cocktails from rooftops, which actually resulted in his arrest at an impossibly young age. Then, at age 15, he got expelled from school after setting fire, ding, 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 to one of his classrooms by mixing chemicals and for writing sexually explicit letters to one of his teachers.
He's just checking the whole spread of psychopathy boxes, isn't he?
For sure. I'm surprised that he was so empathetic and loving towards animals. I really am.
Yeah, true. You would not expect that with setting stuff on fire and throwing Molotov cocktails.
Right. He's
people.
Otherwise so very classic, in his symptoms. Charles's parents ended up shipping him off to England to live with relatives while attending an all-boys prep school called High Bentham Grammar. But life under his Uncle Rufus's roof was anything but cozy. Food was scarce, and his bedroom in winter was less quaint countryside and more meat locker. There was absolutely no heat. Eventually, Charles relocated to San Francisco to live with an aunt. Then, in October 1979, just shy of his 19th birthday, Charles falsified documents to claim that he was born in Bloomington, Indiana, rather than Hong Kong, before enlisting in the United States Marine Corps. Charles, a quiet loner with thick black glasses now, threw himself into survivalism with near religious devotion, splitting his free time between martial arts drills and devouring anything he could learn about combat and weaponry. He served as a gunner with the 1st Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment, Weapons Company at the Marine Corps Air Station in Hawaii. While stationed there, he caught wind of a survivalist compound in Northern California known as The Ranch, loosely being run by a man named Leonard Lake, though at the time, Leonard was hiding behind the alias Tom Myers. By the way, side note, Leonard Lake went on to have about 12 different aliases over the course of his criminal life. Soon after, Charles decided to stockpile his own arsenal by stealing a cache of rifles, grenades, handguns, and enough ammunition to start a small war. But he didn't get far, because 3 days later, Naval Investigative Service NIS officers arrested him. But on November 13th, 1981, in a move that can only be described as absolutely brazen, Charles escaped, slipping through an open interrogation room window while surrounded by military police known as chasers. Incredible that he managed to escape. A friend smuggled him off base in the trunk of a car, dropped him in a remote corner of Hawaii where he camped out in a rainforest for 2 days, enduring swarms of mosquitoes and a vicious bout of diarrhea that could have doubled as biological warfare. There are so many fucking similarities between Charles and Leonard, it's insane. With the little cash that he had left, Charles bought a plane ticket to San Francisco and called upon a fellow survivalist named Leonard Lake, aka Tom Myers. And Leonard invited Charles to stay with him and his wife Cricket in Philo, California. And Charles, still riding the adrenaline high of his escape and having no other viable option, accepted the offer. And that kind of brings us to where we were in the case, right? The throuple moved onto Indian Creek Ranch, but since Leonard began stockpiling heavy-duty weapons as part of his doomsday prepping, locals began to report that items were missing. 6 months later, the FBI raided their little hidey hole of weapons on Indian Creek Ranch and learned that Leonard's new roomie was actually an escaped military fugitive. Needless to say, law enforcement dragged both asshats into custody along with Cricket, but she was not held legally accountable. I mentioned that already because apparently all the evidence against her was circumstantial. So she was let go. Okay, Charles got shipped back to Hawaii to face a court-martial, cut himself a plea deal, and landed in one of the oldest, nastiest federal pens in the country, Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks. Meanwhile, Leonard jumped bail and slipped into life as a fugitive, selling drugs for money and living in and out of cheap motels. He and Cricket also formally divorced at this point, and she went on to live with her parents. And Charles and Leonard kept their creepy little bromance alive through letters, with Charles even sending Leonard origami angels he folded in his jail cell. Because when you've got nothing but time in lockup, why not channel your homicidal energy into arts and crafts projects? And this, more or less, brings us to the present day in this episode's timeline. We've covered the backstories of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng and how these two seemingly random bottom feeders collided. Now it's time to get into the truly fucked up part, how they started dipping their slimy hammer toes into the murky, blood-warm waters of serial killing. It began, horrifyingly, with Leonard's 31-year-old brother, Donald. At this early stage, Charles was still behind bars and Leonard was operating as a solo artist, so to speak, sharpening his teeth. In December 1982, Leonard had gone to visit his mother and sisters, again, so he had half-sisters in addition to his full sister, Sylvia, back in the Bay Area. Donald still lived with their mother, Gloria, as he was left mentally impaired at the age of 9 after being struck by a train.
Whoa, jeez.
Since then, Donald survived on Social Security disability payments, something that Leonard held in absolute contempt. In Leonard's worldview, anyone who took quote-unquote government handouts was a useless, worthless mooch, a lazy parasite, as he put it. It didn't matter that Donald's limitations were the direct result of a catastrophic accident, or that he had actually also served in the army. To Leonard, none of that counted. His brother was, in his eyes, subhuman, and Leonard despised him accordingly, and without mercy, without nuance, and without even the basic compassion one might expect from a sibling. Which is why the family found it absolutely shocking when Leonard invited Donald on a trip up north to fill a job opening as a house sitter. But they were thrilled to see the brothers connecting. Unfortunately, no one would ever see Donald Lake again, because Leonard, his big brother, shot him in the head.
That's devastating. This guy's also giving like sovereign citizen vibes.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yep. Their mother reported Donald missing, and on New Year's Day, 1983, Leonard, under the alias Alan Dre, rented a room in a shared house on 19th Avenue in San Francisco after stealing Donald's identity and cashing his disability checks. So he went by the alias Alan Dre, but he had all of the ID cards for his brother and started using that. To cement the deception, Leonard even forged a letter to their mother, posing as Donald, claiming that he moved to Reno, Nevada to live with drug dealers. His body has never been found or identified, obviously, if it wasn't found, though remains believed to belong to Donald Lake were recovered from the property where Leonard and Charles wound up burying their future victims. However, those remains officially remain unidentified to date. It was around this time that Leonard started keeping a journal, his own twisted manifesto, which is why we now have a disturbingly rich paper trail to dissect when trying to understand the depths of this astoundingly depraved human being. That, of course, and the philosophy tape that I mentioned in the beginning, right, quote-unquote philosophy tape. He wrote about everything from deep thoughts to depraved sexual interests, such as a 16-year-old girl of uncommon beauty that he'd seen on a bus. He detailed things like her hair, complexion, physique, while also writing about meeting up with, quote, doped-up whores he'd feed drugs into before photographing, sometimes posing as if they were corpses in a graveyard. One quote from his journal read, quote, "I am a dangerous person. Society would worry if they knew I existed and what I was up to. But more than my victim, I am the most suitable of victims. I don't exist in the official world," because remember, he's a fugitive. "No job, no taxes, no one to keep track of me day to day. If I were to disappear, it might be months before anyone would even wonder. And then, what could they do?" End quote.
Because we're in the early 80s at this point, right?
Yeah.
It's so strange from a 2025 perspective to think about a time where there wasn't just like a phone in your pocket and so much like digital tracing of your entire life where you could just literally go and like steal or even forge documents, make stuff up, and just totally exist in like a like quote unquote normal sort of capacity.
Yeah, you could go off the grid, but also be part of society. So Leonard also talked a lot about one particular woman in his journal, and that woman was his dear old mother. Leonard clearly wrestled with lifelong mommy issues that bled into every corner of his psyche, fueling his misogyny, shaping his warped views on power and control, and likely planting the seeds for the violent sexual fantasies that came to define his crimes. By 1983, Leonard began taking day trips to a cabin located 3 hours away in Wilseyville, which was technically owned by Cricket and Cricket's father. Even though Leonard and Cricket were divorced, they kept in touch and were still friends, and she allowed him to use her family's cabin. Down the line, there were questions about whether or not she was like heavily complicit in what went down in that cabin, or if she had knowledge about what he was doing in that cabin, which we'll get onto.
She was kind of okay with everything that was going on while they were together.
She was very much okay with having other partners. She was very much okay with being submissive, letting him take pictures of her. She even actually posed as some of his future victims, which we'll go on to hear. Like, in other words, she was still kind of like having sex with him after he was raping and killing women, and he would have her pose as his victims, and she would do it. So there was like really heavy questioning about Cricket's involvement.
Yeah, sure.
So this cabin was an ideal location for Leonard because it was extremely secluded and it existed at the end of 200 yards of unpaved road surrounded by the thick cover of trees. On multiple occasions, Leonard invited his best friend and former best man at his wedding, 34-year-old Charles Gunner, to go with him. I'm going to refer to Charles Gunner as Gunner moving forward so as not to get him confused with Charles Ng. Realizing that he'd much rather have Gunner's government checks than his friendship, Leonard organized what he referred to as Operation Fish, since Gunner was an extremely overweight human being who Leonard would refer to as Orca. So killing Gunner/Orca became known as Operation Fish. After failing to kill Gunnar by lacing his snacks with powdered poison and a mixture of gas vapors, Leonard wound up just killing him with a gun instead. Then he stole Gunnar's yellow Volkswagen van, his government checks, his home, and his identity. Eventually, years later in 1992, Gunnar's remains were indeed found when there was some construction happening on the Wilsonville property. And it was actually determined that Gunnar was shot by 2 different guns, which again would go on to call Crickett's potential involvement into question. Like, were there 2 shooters? So I mentioned earlier that Leonard Lake and Charles Ng kept in touch while Charles was in lockup and Leonard was technically still a fugitive. By 1984, Leonard had begun sending photos of the progression of a cinder block structure that he'd been constructing, which resembled a military bunker close to Crickett's cabin near a mountain. In other words, he's building out his torture dungeon. Leonard, of course, planned to survive the apocalypse down there while also detaining sex slaves. Charles fantasized about using that underground bunker to train a paramilitary unit to rob bands and steal goods from military posts, like missiles with which to shoot down passenger planes and bombs with which to blow up bus stations. I mean, I guess a man can dream. Learning his lesson apparently was not on his bingo card, right? Like Charles, he's like, oh, as soon as I get out, I'm going to fucking raid a military bunker and blow shit up.
Escalate to the highest level of like federal offenses.
Right.
Pretty quick there, yeah.
Over time, Charles, too, while incarcerated in Kansas, had begun to fantasize about sexually torturing women, just like his good old pal Lenny. Other incarcerated men would later reflect on how Charles Ng used to openly discuss his fantasy of sexually torturing women. Like, this dipshit didn't even try and hide it. Leonard was busy still preparing for Operation Miranda, meanwhile, burying drums packed tightly with medication, food, weapons, clothing, money, and, of course, naked pictures so that he'd always be able to rub one out if the rest of humanity got blown to pieces. He also purchased a female German Shepherd puppy named Wubon, nobody knows what that name means, by the way, after deciding to kill a local feral mommy cat to punish her for giving birth to kittens that ignited his allergies.
Very not vegan, very not cool.
Leonard also killed a male dog belonging to a neighbor, but so charming and charismatic was Leonard the lunatic that the couple whose dog he killed ultimately invited him over for dinner and eventually wound up exchanging pornographic videos with him. What am I reading?
What the fuck?
What am I saying to you people right now? These are just some of the worst sentences I've ever uttered, so can we please move on? So Leonard is continuing to work on building out a bunker near the cabin at this point while fantasizing about ways in which he would capture, torture, and enslave an M lady, okay? M as in Miranda. At this point, we've arrived at October 23rd, 1983, which is exactly where we started this episode in my intro when I described Leonard Lake delivering his fucked up soliloquy into a video camera. He was making progress on the bunker, having laid cement over earth and hired people to help move construction along quicker. This is also the time in which Charles Ng was released from prison, just 26 months after his arrest in Philo. And he was notably not extradited to Hong Kong, which was a clerical flub that went on to become a massive source of controversy down the line.
Oh, right, because he falsified his enlistment papers.
And 7 months later, on July 9th, 1984, Charles Ng made his way to San Francisco to help execute Operation Miranda. And as a result, it's believed that 25 men, women, and children were tortured, sexually assaulted, humiliated, dismembered, burned, and crushed. Because after their union, the Snuff Film Killers were officially hatched. And that's where I am leaving you guys for now, because if you think Leonard Lake's obsession with control and Charles Ng's parasitic sadism were disturbing in the daylight of their so-called normal lives, wait until I take you underground. In part 2, we're going to step inside the bunker and show you exactly how Leonard and Charles broke their victims down physically and psychologically, how they filmed the suffering, how they turned human lives into props for their depraved fantasies, And I'll tell you how it all finally ended. What became of these two fucking shitheads who fancied themselves masterminds, but were really nothing more than pathetic douchebags hiding behind cruelty. Trust me, what's coming in part 2 is darker, more grotesque, and more revealing than you can possibly imagine. And you are not going to want to miss it. So as I said in the intro, be sure to subscribe to Psychopedia wherever you are listening to this right now to make sure you don't miss when this episode releases. And I'm winking my eye at you. You just can't see it. And that's it, guys.
Boy.
Yeah, if you've made it this far.
Gee.
You guys are real ones. Listen, with these 2-part coverages of serial killers in particular, the first part is typically exactly what I presented today. It's laying the groundwork and the foundation because more often than not, these individuals come from very complex backgrounds, and to understand what they went on to do and what I will detail for you in part 2, we really need to understand where they came from. So hopefully you have your head around that after finishing part 1. And that you will come back for part 2 to get real dark. This is Sadistic September here at Psychopedia, so, it's not pleasant, right? It's not like, I don't know, what's a happy word that starts with S? It's not Sunshine September. It's Sadistic September. You know what I mean?
My scrotal region is still hurting after last week's episode, September.
Well, that's an S word for you. Okay, guys, that's it. Just my usual sort of housekeeping ways to leave off here. Patreon.com/PsychopediaPod is going to have all episodes ad-free. It's going to have Girl on Gore episodes airing early. Make sure you check out Girl on Gore, which drops on the Psychopedia feed. It's my other podcast series. As always, guys, thank you so much for being here, for your comments. If you would be so kind as to do your part and leave a heart in the comments on Spotify or on Apple. It means so much to me to just know you guys are listening and to feel connected to you in that way. But if you don't, that's okay too. I love and appreciate you all the same. And I can't wait to see you guys back here for part 2. And it's not going to be a full week. So I'm just gonna say that, and I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for listening. Bye.